This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, we have an heir out of place.
And will be in the moment.
And we have a flood of wet fields to tell you about.
All that and more on the Four Rivers Ag Report.
Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta.
And I'm Monica Becker. So let's address the elephant in the room. It's still wet, not as wet, but still wet, and I hate being a wet blanket, but more wet is forecasted. Somewhere in Illinois, a few more lucky ducks, or maybe anxious Andes, have made it into the fields. We'll go over the figures in news later, but over 90% of the corn acres remain fields of dandelions.
Well, let's discuss something a little bit less depressing. Estate planning, a topic that includes both death and taxes, and one that very few of us do as well as we should. Having lived through the shadows of an estate getting passed on, many farmers who think they've had things lined up would be surprised that the problems can arise from the strangest of places. In June, the University of Illinois Tax School is offering a one-day seminar on farm estates and succession planning. So I asked the organizer of the event, Gary Hoff, why farmers and their heirs should start thinking about succession long before they think it's time to think about succession.
Well, I mean, who knows when it's long before time to think about it. There are certainly some untimely deaths. And one part of estate planning is everyone needs a will just because of that. They need to keep in mind that their estate plan can change over time and probably should. Now, I see people go to their attorney to do an estate plan on December 20th and say, I need this done before the end of the year. Well, it isn't a 5-minute process. If it's going to be done right, there's lots of questions that will be asked. There's lots of thought that that farm family needs to think about. And really, not only the father and mother in the plan, but there needs to be some discussion with the heirs as well. I certainly have run into situations where, due to lack of communication between the children and the parents, that estate plan would not work at all. For example, you have 2 children on the farm, and the plan is to set up some type of an entity where they farm together. And I've had both of the children tell me, there's no way we will farm together once dad or mom's gone.
So it's the sort of thing that you need to make sure the heirs are on board with before you begin, right?
That's correct. And both the farming heirs and the non-farming heirs run into the situations where, let's say we've got 3 children. In fact, I'm writing up for Farm Doc Daily right now where we have 2 sons and a daughter. Dad has a stroke, and one son comes back to the farm and operates it for 15 years till dad and mom pass away. Come time for the reading of the will, son got the farm, the other 2 children got some cash that was there, not nearly the value of the farm. And they blame that farming child for having mom and dad do that. And it wasn't the case.
Right.
Okay? The case was that 15 years ago, that farm wasn't nearly as valuable as it is today. But also, if he hadn't come home and operated the farm, it wouldn't be there today because dad was incapacitated.
That brings up the question, with the rapid change in the value of farmland, a relatively small farm can be worth millions of dollars. How do you plan for values that you cannot possibly foresee?
One is you take a look every year and say, is this still reasonable? If you don't think you can do that, then you could do it by some kind of a formula clause, which says, let's take the total value of our assets and let's do a percentage of it to the farming children and maybe a different percentage to the non-farming. what I like to tell farm families is there's a difference between equal and equitable. And, you need to keep in mind that if you've had children there helping you run the farm for a number of years, they're part of the reason that's increased in value. And in many cases, they're not paid the same kind of a wage they would be working off the farm. So, in my opinion, there should be some kind of compensation for that.
At the seminar, they're going to be talking about training the heirs. What do you mean by that, and how do you go about training someone who receives a wonderful gift at the end of someone's farming life?
It really depends on how the farm has operated in the past. If dad, or could be mom, has made all the decisions, what varieties of grain or corn do we plant, what's the fertility, etc., and all the kids have done is drive the tractor, they're not going to be prepared to step into mom or dad's shoes and take over. So I'm saying that training needs to happen on a continuing basis. You need to let them make some decisions, knowing they'll make some mistakes, and coach them as you go along the way, so that on your demise, or when you want to retire and move to Arizona or Florida, you feel comfortable that they're going to be able to pick up the ball and run with it.
You mentioned retirement, and yet the average age of farmers keeps going up and up and up, and people are farming longer and longer. Machineries and tools allow them to do just that. I don't know too many farmers who talk about retirement. Is that something they really should be thinking about too?
Oh, exactly. When I go back to the 70s and 80s when we had the farm crisis, and in fact, when I was in college, I was taught in my classes that money should be invested in real estate. You don't need a retirement plan because the land will be worth more.
Right.
Then I saw the crash in values. I saw dad and mom wanting to retire, children wanting to farm, and saying, we can't pay you the kind of rent that you need for your retirement. And they were forced to try to live on just their Social Security. So I am a firm believer in having a cash type retirement plan in addition to just owning the real estate, because there's a good chance that you won't want to sell it, or the kids won't want to sell it. So that's part of what we want to talk about in our meeting is, okay, how do you take that into account? How do you plan for that? What types of investment should you have? I look at what's happening the last 2 years with grain prices. Where do I see the money going? Back into more high-priced real estate. What an excellent time to put part of that aside in cash that you know is going to be there to give you a monthly check in retirement. Because in all probability, the Social Security won't maintain the lifestyle that you want to have.
The seminar, Farm Estate and Succession Planning, is going to be held on June 24th in Normal. Go to the U of I Extension website for details. It's hosted by the one and only Todd Gleason. Be sure to stop in and tell him hi from me. Well, we've put off the bad news long enough, young lady. How wet is it?
Well, to quote the Illinois Weather and Crop Report for this week, corn planting got underway in isolated pockets of the state last week where soils were dry enough. Who knew that isolated pockets made up 7% of the state? We checked with our crop guys, and no one is even close to heading in around here, although Matt Bennett thought that if we didn't get much more rain, he might try it next week. Last year statewide, we were at 88% planted, and the 5-year average is 48%. This year, our topsoil surplus moisture is at 83%, and the warm, sunny, dry days haven't been enough to dry out the ground for planting. Nationally, planting is way behind as well. The USDA numbers show that a little over 25 million acres have been planted so far this year. That sounds like a lot until you see that on average, 73 million acres are normally planted this time of year, leaving us almost 50 million acres short. And just so you don't feel like you're the only farmer Mother Nature is picking on, farmers in Minnesota had to deal with snow delaying planting. Really? In May? On the good news front, the USDA's weather folk have declared the drought is affecting less of the nation and reducing the effect of recent flooding. The USDA's Bob Ellison has more.
Most of the Midwestern flooding has peaked outside of the northern Red River Valley, according to USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey, who adds that more rain on the way does not mean more flooding.
Even though we have a new storm that's starting to affect the region, it doesn't look like rainfall totals will be quite enough to bring a whole new round of flooding. Yes, we'll see some localized flooding developing in some of the lowland areas, but no more big flooding like what we saw back in late April.
The flooding was not as bad as it could have been, which Rippey says was due in part to the drought.
The fact that we have subsoil moisture that's still on the short side across a lot of areas like Iowa and Minnesota is helping to soak up some of the moisture and certainly has minimized the flooding. It could have been a lot worse if we'd had a wet winter and early spring.
And as for the drought, Rippey says the cool, wet spring reduced drought-affected areas.
If you look at the entire country, we still see about 47% of the country in drought, but almost all that area is now focused across the Great Plains and points west.
So does the cool, wet spring mean a cool, wet summer? It depends on a high-pressure system stalled over the North Atlantic.
Without El Nino or La Nina, it's a very tough summer to forecast. Right now, we're kind of hanging the forecast on the North Atlantic block, and if it persists, look for this cool, wet weather pattern to break down, and we'll trend into a hotter, drier June and July, which would not be favorable for crops because then we'd have late planting compounded with the fact that we'd be heading into a hotter, drier summer.
In Washington, D.C., for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, I'm Bob Ellison.
And procrastinators, consider yourself duly warned. The 2012 Census of Agriculture officially closes on May 31st. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is urging farmers and ranchers not to miss this opportunity to be counted and help determine the future of farming in America. The USDA has already received more than 2 million completed census forms. The census, which is taken every 5 years, is an important part of the data collection that the USDA uses to help lawmakers, businesses, and farmers make important decisions. What happens if you don't return the forms they send you? You can expect the NASS to try and contact you either by phone or in person. Send it. It's easier that way.
Yes, most certainly is. Get
Yeah.
those forms in. Another piece of information we'd like is if you are thinking about heading out into fields, we'd like to know.
Contact us at WEIU at WEIU.net, subject line 4 Rivers Ag Report, and tell us where and when.
So when the fields are right, we'd love to get footage of the first guys out.
And I want to be there.
Yes, she does.
Yes.
So let us know. With me now is Larry Quicksall of the Crossroad Beekeepers Club. And Larry, first of all, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Okay. Now, bees are sometimes considered a pest, but really around here, we couldn't get by without bees. Is that correct?
That's very true. They can be both a pest and a necessity. This morning I was visiting a family over near Greenup, and they had a swarm that had moved into a hole in a tree in their front yard. That is a pest for them. But we definitely need bees because they're one of the most efficient pollinators that we have for crops. And the need for pollination, the basic rule of thumb is of every 3 bites of food you eat, one of those bites is based upon pollination by honeybees.
Now, that seems like quite a statement. What sort of crops are we talking about? Not just fruits and vegetables, right?
No, it's for nearly, Nearly all plants that we have for food have some level of pollination needs. Some it's wind pollination, like corn. The bees are not really involved in that for pollination. But when you get to your different squashes, watermelons, pumpkins, cucumbers, those kind of garden vegetables, most of those require some level of pollination, of which bees are very efficient. If you like almonds, almonds are virtually 100% pollinated by honeybees in California. And they've actually had a problem this year because there were a lot of colony losses over the winter months, and they did not have enough beehives to be trucked to California. They need 1.6 million beehives just for the almond pollination, and they didn't get that many this year.
Now, that brings up two questions. The first, which is, I've read about the colony collapse disorder, is that correct? Now, what is that, and what do we know about it now?
Well, it was first identified and termed that back around 2006, where there's a variety of things that can kill bees. There's different mites, there's diseases, they can freeze out in the wintertime. And in those cases, you always have a pile of dead bees in your hive.
Right.
And you can examine them to see what the cause is. With colony collapse, they have hives with no bees. And they just abandon their brood, they abandon their comb, they're just not there.
Okay.
And that's what makes that a little bit unusual. And they're trying to figure out, why don't the bees come back? What's keeping them from returning? And there's been a variety of different theories. Cell phones was one of the original theories
Yes, I
kicked
remember
around,
that.
and that was proven or found to not have any evidence. Pesticides and some of the new systemic pesticides that are on the market, that's a large concern. The amount of stress that's on bees that are being trucked and shipped, changes in their diet where they're only getting one type of pollen, because
Okay.
pollen is their protein.
Right.
So if they're in the middle of an almond grove, then that's all they're getting. Or if they're in the middle of this, how many hundreds of acres of cucumbers,
Right.
they're not getting as balanced of a diet. And that's where we see most of the colony collapse disorder at this time. It's not with the small beekeeper who has, like I have, don't around a dozen hives.
Right.
It's with your big pollination services.
Okay, now that leads, the second question is, why don't people encourage hives around their agricultural products as opposed to trucking in millions of bees at the time?
if you are a large monoculture program, like again going back to the almonds, you're in the almond business. You only need bees for about 3 weeks. You don't need the expense of taking care of them for the whole year, and then you would have to have all the other maintenance personnel to handle that. So you just rent them, kind of like leasing equipment.
Right. Okay, so we need the bees.
Yes.
So therefore, we probably need the beekeepers, right?
That goes along with it.
What does it take to keep a colony of bees these days?
It's not as hard as what some people may think it is. Most people are afraid of the little stingers, and you do have to have a bit of a personality maybe if you want
Some people
to.
say I got stung and swelling up right here, but
Well, we'll leave
yeah,
that
well,
one
thank you
alone.
very much.
But it's when people understand and are educated about bees, they realize that most of their fears are unfounded. So to me, what got me into beekeeping just back in 2010 was I kind of was looking for a hobby that was going to be very different from what I typically do in my life. And my wife was taking a class for the Master Gardener program with the
Okay.
U of I Extension. And my wife, Dawn, came home and she was all excited and was talking about what plants require bees for pollination. I thought, I've never really studied on bees. I'm going to look them up on the internet.
And you didn't have to thought bee.
And I kept reading and was more and more fascinated because they're not just a simple insect. And that kind of got me hooked. And so I started going through training and workshops, and that's really all it takes.
It's not a
little bit of
complicated hobby, is
it's
it?
not too complicated. No. There's children that do it, there's elderly that do it. Our bee club, we have kids that are grade school all the way up to people in their 90s.
Now, speaking of the bee club,
Yes.
you have an event coming up on Monday, correct?
Yes, we have a monthly meeting. It's on the second Monday of every month, and it's from 6:30 to 8 at the U of I Extension in Effingham. And this month, our speaker, which would be on the 13th, is Tim Lindley. and he is from Greenville. He has Big T's Honeybee Farm,
Okay.
and him and some others just started a bee club over there in Greenville.
Okay. What's the topic?
The topic is the biology of bees as a superorganism, basically looking at the entire hive, not just the individual bees, but how they function as one large organism.
So yes, and that's what I was reading, and that's very, very complicated how the bees just communicate as a swarm.
They communicate based on smells, they communicate based on vibrations, they communicate based on what we call a bee dance behavior. In order to coordinate all this, there's really no time to learn the information, because when you have a worker bee during like this season right now, their lifespan is only 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yet they take on very specific roles based on the pheromones that are released by the queen and apparently what happens at certain ages. But they progress from feeding the younger larva to the older larva to guarding the hive to making wax to going out and foraging for food, which basically wears out their body at the end.
So we're a lot to learn about bees. It's Monday, the 13th at 6:30 at the U of I Extension Hall in Effingham.
Yes, just the west entrance, go down to the basement. We have about 40 people there on any given meeting.
Well, listen, Larry, thank you so much. I've learned a
My
lot about bees.
pleasure.
Hello, this is Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. If you've already responded to the Census of Agriculture, thank you. If you've not responded, it's not too late. Every voice counts. Local and national leaders use the census to make decisions that directly impact your operation, your community, and your industry. Complete and return your census form today. Remember, the Census of Agriculture is your voice, your future, and your responsibility.
Well, it may be quiet around those fields, but it's still happening around town. Jessica Killo has more with Inside Extension.
Hi, I'm Jessica Killo with your Inside Extension. It's not too late to sign up for our 4 Seasons Gardening Telenet series. The Gardening Telenet series is your chance to learn from leading lawn and garden experts. There is no charge and anyone is welcome. The last program in the series will be held May 21st. Don't Doubt the Drought will discuss how landscape will respond to the 2012 drought, as well as growth expectations in 2013 on lawns, newly planted trees, shrubs, and evergreens. This telenet will also discuss what we should be looking for with established trees and what are some of the best management practices for helping our landscape plants recover. The telenets will be conducted in Charleston, Arthur, and Shelbyville. To learn more and to register, go to our website. Give your brain a workout. Sign up for our brain training to be held on June 17th and 24th from 1:30 until 3 o'clock p.m. at the Shelbyville Senior Center. Extension educator Sherry Burcham will be teaching this class as part of the Lakeland Community Programs. Register now at lakelandcollege.edu. All ages are welcome. And don't forget, we are now on Twitter. Follow us at UIEXT19 to receive updates on agriculture, master gardeners, family life, 4-H and youth, and more. In addition, we have created a new Twitter account just for ag updates. We will be tweeting pertinent and timely crop information. Follow us at UIEXT19, capital A, capital G. As always, like us on Facebook and visit our website to stay up to date on our programming. From U of I Extension serving Coles, Cumberland, Moultrie, Douglas, and Shelby counties, this has been Jessica Killo with your Inside Extension.
And finally, this weekend is Mother's Day. The second Sunday in May has become a time to which we honor those to whom, without their sacrifices, we would not be the people we are today. More than just roses or brunch or a box of candy, most mothers I know would prefer the gift of your time, either by phone or more likely in person. And if you would, just tell your mom how much you love her and how much she's done for you. And then after that, give her the roses, the brunch, and the candy. Better safe than sorry. So are you all set for Mother's Day?
Well, I got the cards and the alarm set on my phone.
I'll make sure you wake up to make that phone call.
That's the idea. That's it for this week. Work hard, be safe, and enjoy those beautiful sunsets. I'm Monica Becker.
And I'm Fred Peralta. Thanks for watching the Four Rivers Ag Report. You know, on the Four Rivers Ag Report, we're always looking for news that is of interest to the agricultural and the rural communities. Every week we scour the local papers, the state and national websites. We talk to lots and lots of people every day looking for information that will help and or entertain you. There is one more way that we can find out the latest news, topics, trends, and events that are part of your life. You can tell us. We'd love to hear from you about what's going on in your town, on your farm, or even on your neighbor's farm. If you got a topic you'd like us to talk about, let us know. I probably won't know the answer, but I probably know people who do. Please let us know what is happening. You can call us at 217-581-7245. You can email us at weiu@weiu.net. We're on Facebook at WEIU TV, public broadcast station. And if you tweet, we're on Twitter at 4RiversAg. So now that you got a number, don't be a stranger.